Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the surprisingly complex mind of a hummingbird, specifically a ruby-throated beauty who's currently perched on her favorite willow branch at 4 in the morning, calculating exactly how many trumpet flowers she'll need to visit before her first territorial dispute of the day. Between maintaining a heart rate that would send any fitness tracker into emergency mode and consuming enough nectar to fuel those 75 wing beats per second, you probably couldn't handle their level of overthinking. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're settling in, share in the comments what you think your cat might overthink about when they're staring at that empty corner at 3 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey through one anxious creature's mind. You shift slightly on your perch, your 3-gram body already burning through the energy reserves you so carefully stored during yesterday's torpor. The pre-dawn darkness wraps around you like a weighted blanket, except instead of comfort, it brings the familiar flutter of morning anxiety. Your internal clock, more precise than any smartwatch, tells you sunrise is exactly 47 minutes away, which means you have 47 minutes to plan your entire day's feeding route. The math begins automatically, a constant companion to your existence. 2,000 flowers. That's your daily minimum, not a goal, not an aspiration, but a biological imperative. Your brain, which makes up 4.2% of your body weight, the largest percentage of any bird, a fact that sometimes feels more like a burden than a blessing, starts running the calculations. If each flower visit takes 3 seconds and travel time between flowers averages 2 seconds, that's 5 seconds per flower, which means 10,000 seconds, which translates to roughly 2.7 hours of pure feeding time. But wait, your tiny mind protests that doesn't account for territorial disputes. Yesterday, that aggressive male from the oak tree cluster spent 12 whole minutes chasing you away from the bee balm patch. 12 minutes. That's 144 flower visits lost to his ridiculous machismo. You feel your crop, that specialized food storage pouch, gurgle with preemptive hunger. Scientists have documented that hummingbirds must consume approximately half their body weight in nectar daily, plus protein from small insects. This fact circles your consciousness like a particularly persistent gnat. Half your body weight, every single day. It's like being permanently enrolled in an extreme eating competition where the prize is simply continuing to exist. You test your wings with a subtle buzz, all 75 beats per second, for just a moment, feeling the familiar strain in your flight muscles. They make up 25 to 30% of your body weight, these magnificent engines of survival. But lately, you've been wondering if they're also engines of anxiety. Every wing beat burns calories. Every hover demands sugar. Every aerial chase with a competitor depletes resources you'll need to frantically replace. The darkness begins its slow retreat, and with it comes the pressure. You know that the early bird gets the worm. Or in your case, the early hummingbird gets the freshest nectar before the bees wake up and start hogging all the good flowers. But rushing out too early means navigating in low light, risking collision with spider webs that could trap your delicate wings. Too late, and you're fighting crowds at every bloom. Your mind drifts to the concept of work-life balance, a phrase you overheard from the humans who maintain the feeder near the garden shed. What even constitutes life when work is literally staying alive? When does feeding stop being work and start being self-care? Is visiting your favorite patch of cardinal flowers considered me time if you're simultaneously calculating sugar content and watching for predators? The sky lightens another degree, painting the world in those soft grays that precede dawn. You notice your breathing has quickened, preparing for the metabolic explosion that awaits. Your resting heart rate, already an impressive 250 beats per minute, starts climbing toward its active rate of over 1,200. The humans think their morning coffee gives them a boost. They have no idea what it's like to wake up and immediately need to consume your body weight in fuel just to maintain consciousness. A distant chirp signals that Margaret, the female who controls the honeysuckle hedge, is stirring. Great! Margaret always acts like she invented the figure-8 flight pattern, showing off her territory with those exaggerated loops. You'll need to hit the salvia patch before she gets there, or face another lecture on respecting established feeding hierarchies. The first rays of sunlight hit the trumpet vine, and suddenly it's go time. You launch yourself from the willow branch with the explosive acceleration that would make any drag racer jealous, 0 to 30 miles per hour in the space of a heartbeat. But instead of the pure joy of flight you remember from your fledgling days, your mind immediately shifts into territory management mode. Your first stop is the feeder by the garden shed, that reliable source of sugar water that the humans religiously refill every 3 days. As you approach, you spot him. Gerald. Of course it's Gerald, that iridescent green bully who acts like he personally invented the concept of defending feeding sites. He's already stationed himself on the shepherd's hook, wings spread in that passive-aggressive display that clearly says, "This is my feeder, find your own, feeder." You hover at what you hope is a respectful distance, about 3 feet away, running rapid calculations. Is it worth the energy expenditure to challenge him? A typical territorial chase burns approximately 0.02 calories, which doesn't sound like much until you remember your total body fat reserves equal about 0.07 calories. One aggressive encounter could wipe out nearly a third of your emergency fuel supplies. Gerald cocks his head, and you can practically see the thought bubble forming above his ruby throat. Here it comes, the aggressive chittering that roughly translates to, "I don't see your name on this feeder." You've been through this dance so many times, you could perform it in your sleep. Except you don't really sleep, you enter torpor, which is a whole different anxiety spiral you'll deal with tonight. The chase begins with Gerald's signature move, a steep dive followed by a U-shaped swoop designed to build momentum for the pursuit. You execute a barrel roll, not because it's tactically necessary, but because sometimes you need to remind yourself that flying can still be fun, even when it's basically aerial combat disguised as breakfast acquisition. As you weave through the garden, dodging ceramic gnomes and wind chimes, a thought crosses your mind. Is this toxic workplace behavior? If the garden were an office, would Gerald be getting called into HR for creating a hostile work environment? The way he tail fans during disputes, spreading those outer tail feathers in an admittedly impressive but clearly intimidating display, feels like the hummingbird equivalent of aggressive posturing in a board meeting. You manage to loop back to the feeder while Gerald is still figuring out how you pulled off that figure 8 around the bird bath. Success. You thrust your bill into the port, that perfectly engineered beak that's literally built for this one job, and start drinking. The 20% sugar solution floods your crop, instant energy that your body starts processing before you've even finished swallowing. But there's no time to savor the sweetness. Zoologists have observed that hummingbirds spend only 10 to 15% of their day actually feeding, with the rest devoted to perching and defending territory. This statistic haunts you as you realize you're spending more time fighting about food access than actually accessing food. It's like being a security guard at your own grocery store. Gerald returns, of course he does, executing what can only be described as an angry hover. His wings beat so fast, they create that distinctive metallic humming that gives your species its name, cranked up to what sounds like 11. You've got maybe 2 more seconds of feeding before he makes physical contact, which could damage your feathers and ground you for precious hours of preening repair time. You disengage from the feeder with the kind of reluctant acceptance usually reserved for leaving a warm bed on a cold morning. As you retreat to the neutral zone by the butterfly bush, you catch yourself wondering when feeding became so complicated. Remember being a fledgling when your mother would just bring you food? Those 3 weeks of being fed every 20 minutes seemed stressful then. But now it looks like paradise compared to this constant territorial negotiation. The morning patrol continues. Next stop, the bee balm patch that technically falls within your established territory but borders uncomfortably close to Margaret's honeysuckle domain. You approach cautiously, noting that the early morning dew still clings to the tubular flowers, adding extra weight to blooms that will need to support your 3-gram body while you feed. A flash of iridescent green catches your eye. Another male, this one unfamiliar, feeding at your salvias. Your salvias. The injustice burns hotter than your metabolic rate. Don't they know you've been cultivating this relationship with these particular flowers for weeks? You've memorized their blooming patterns, learned which ones refill with nectar fastest, even developed a specific approach angle that minimizes wind disturbance to the stems. The hover standoff begins. Both of you suspended in midair, wings blurring into invisibility, each waiting for the other to make the first move. It's exhausting, this constant vigilance, this perpetual readiness for conflict. Your flight muscles scream for the sugar they're burning to maintain this aggressive hovering, but backing down means losing access to prime feeding spots. You click out a warning call, that sharp chip-chip sound that means business. The intruder responds with his own vocal threat, and suddenly you're engaged in the hummingbird equivalent of a rap battle, each trying to out-chitter the other. Where did this aggression come from? You used to be such a peaceful fledgling, content to feed alongside your siblings. Now look at you, ready to throw down over a patch of flowers like some kind of nectar gangster. The sun reaches its zenith, transforming the garden into a shimmering heat mirage, and you feel your metabolism shift into what can only be described as overdrive. Your heart, that miraculous muscle no bigger than a pencil eraser, pounds out its rhythm at 1,260 beats per minute. You pause mid-hover to contemplate this fact, which immediately makes you anxious about wasting valuable hovering time on contemplation. 1,260 beats per minute. The math spirals out before you can stop it. That's 21 beats per second. In the time it takes a human heart to beat once, yours has already completed an entire drum solo. By the end of today, your heart will have beaten over 1 million times. 1 million. The number feels impossible, like those statistics about stars in the galaxy that make your brain shut down in self-defense. You dart toward the shade of the Japanese maple, seeking relief from the noon sun that's turning your iridescent feathers into tiny solar panels. As you perch on a branch, no thicker than a coffee stirrer, you notice your breathing. Or rather, you notice that you can't really notice it because it's happening 250 times per minute. Everything about your existence operates at a speed that would terrify most creatures. Scientists have discovered that hummingbird hearts can actually change size throughout the day, swelling during peak activity and shrinking during rest. This knowledge doesn't comfort you. If anything, it adds another layer to your metabolic anxiety. Is your heart the right size right now? How would you even know? It's not like there's a hummingbird cardiologist you can visit for a quick EKG. The heat amplifies everything. Your tongue, that extraordinary forked apparatus that can extend far beyond your beak and curl around flower stamens, feels dry despite the constant nectar consumption. You've already processed 6 grams of sugar this morning, twice your body weight in liquid, and somehow you're still hungry. Always hungry. It's like being trapped in a perpetual state of low blood sugar, except your blood sugar is probably so high it would send a glucose meter into existential crisis. A bumblebee lumbers past, its flight pattern so leisurely it might as well be walking. You feel a pang of envy. Bumblebees can take their time, store energy in their fuzzy bodies, even rest on flowers while they feed. You burn between 6 to 12 calories per hour just existing. That's your basal metabolic rate, the energy cost of simply being a hummingbird. It's like paying rent on an apartment where the utilities are always running at maximum capacity. You zip over to the fuchsia hanging basket, those pendulous blooms that always remind you of tiny ballet dancers. As you probe the first flower, extracting nectar at a rate of 13 licks per second, yes, 13 you've counted, you wonder about sustainability. How long can one tiny body maintain this pace? You're essentially living life in permanent fast forward, a tiny feathered Ferrari that never gets to idle. The thought of human fitness influencers crosses your mind, those creatures who brag about their 10,000 daily steps and sunrise yoga sessions. You want to laugh, but that would waste energy. 10,000 steps? Try beating your wings 75 times per second for hours on end. Sunrise yoga? Your morning routine involves aerial dogfights and competitive speed eating. They wouldn't last 5 minutes at hummingbird pace. Your crop gurgles, processing the latest nectar intake with an efficiency that would make any chemical engineer weep with envy. In goes flower juice, out comes pure cellular fuel, no middleman, no waiting period. It's beautiful and terrifying, this metabolic perfection that leaves no room for error. One missed meal and you're running on fumes. 2 missed meals and you're entering emergency protocols. A butterfly floats by, riding air currents like some kind of aerial trust fund kid who's never worked a day in their life. You resist the urge to chase it away from your flowers. That would be petty. Also, it would burn approximately 0.015 calories you can't spare. Everything comes back to the energy equation, the relentless mathematics of survival at the metabolic edge. You've heard humans talk about burnout, this concept of working so hard you exhaust yourself beyond recovery. The irony isn't lost on you. Your entire existence is burnout. Your metabolic rate at rest is higher than most mammals during exercise. You're essentially running a marathon while sitting still, then actually running a marathon when you move. It's exhausting just thinking about how exhausting it is. The sun beats down harder now, and you can feel your internal temperature climbing. Hummingbirds can enter a state of hypothermia if they're not careful, literally overheating their tiny engines. You seek out the garden sprinkler, that blessed human invention that creates perfect water droplet sized for hummingbird bathing. As you dart through the spray, letting the cool water bead on your feathers, you wonder if this counts as self-care or just another necessary maintenance task in your highly demanding existence. Your wings never stop moving even during this bath. Full stop equals fall. Physics doesn't care about your need for rest. You're the only bird that can truly hover, fly backwards, even fly upside down briefly. But these aerial superpowers come with a cost measured in constant motion and perpetual hunger. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to be a penguin. those birds who gave up flight entirely. Sure, they have to deal with leopard seals and Antarctic winters, but at least they can stand still without plummeting. The afternoon light takes on that golden quality that photographers love, and you've learned to associate with peak social hour in the garden. This is when things get complicated. As if maintaining your metabolic requirements wasn't enough of a full-time job, now you have to navigate the complex world of hummingbird social dynamics. A flash of purple gorget catches your eye, and your crop does a little flip that has nothing to do with nectar processing. It's Sebastian, the male who's been performing those elaborate courtship dives near the rose arbor for the past week. You've been pretending not to notice, mainly because noticing would mean responding, and responding would mean taking time away from your carefully calibrated feeding schedule. But there he goes again, climbing to a height of 40 feet, before plummeting earthward in a J-shaped dive that produces a distinctive chirping sound with his tail feathers. The physics of it all makes your head spin. Male hummingbirds can reach speeds of 60 miles per hour during these display dives, pulling nearly 9 Gs at the bottom of the arc. That's more G-force than fighter pilots experience, all in the name of impressing a potential mate. You watch from your perch on the shepherd's hook, trying to look casually disinterested while secretly calculating the caloric expenditure of such theatrical behavior. Sebastian completes his dive and immediately zooms back up for another round. The showing off is actually quite impressive, you have to admit, but your practical mind can't help but wonder about the energy economics. Each dive probably burns 0.05 calories. He's performed 12 dives in the last 10 minutes. That's 0.6 calories spent on what essentially amounts to aerial peacocking. That same energy could secure 40 flower visits, enough to sustain him for another hour. You shift uncomfortably on your perch, aware that social protocol suggests you should respond somehow. A little wing flutter, perhaps? A subtle tail fan? But even these minimal acknowledgements require energy, and you're already behind schedule on your afternoon feeding route. The lantana clusters won't visit themselves, and you've noticed the bees tend to monopolize them after 3 o'clock. Research has shown that female hummingbirds often select mates based on the quality of their dive displays, with faster dives and louder sounds indicating genetic fitness. This information swirls in your brain as Sebastian reaches the apex of his 13th climb. From an evolutionary standpoint, you understand the logic. A male who can waste that much energy on showing off clearly has metabolic reserves to spare, suggesting good genes and efficient foraging abilities. But understanding the science doesn't make the social pressure any less intense. You're supposed to be evaluating his performance while simultaneously maintaining your own survival needs. It's like being asked to judge a talent show while running on a treadmill that you can't slow down or step off. Your female hummingbird ancestors somehow managed to balance mate selection with metabolism, but they probably didn't overthink it this much. Sebastian's latest dive brings him within inches of your perch, the wind from his passage ruffling your carefully preened feathers. The sound his tail feathers produce, a high-pitched chirp created by air rushing through specifically evolved feather slots, is admittedly impressive. But now, your feathers are disheveled, and fixing them will require at least 3 minutes of preening time you hadn't budgeted for. You execute what you hope is a non-committal hover, neither encouraging nor dismissive. The truth is, you're not even sure you're ready for a relationship. Hummingbird partnerships are brief affairs, lasting just long enough for mating before both parties return to their solitary lives. But even those few days of courtship mean disrupted feeding schedules, shared territory negotiations, and the exhausting work of nest building falling entirely on your shoulders. Another male arrives, because of course he does. This one chooses the shuttle display, flying back and forth in precise arcs like a feathered pendulum. Now, you have 2 suitors burning through their energy reserves in competitive showing off, and social expectations suggest you should watch and evaluate both performances. Your crop gurgles insistently, reminding you that you haven't visited the trumpet vine in over an hour. The competitive displaying escalates. Sebastian increases his dive frequency while the newcomer widens his shuttle arcs. They're essentially having a dance off in midair, each trying to out-display the other. You can't help but notice neither of them seems concerned about their caloric expenditure. Must be nice to have such metabolic confidence, to burn energy on courtship without constantly calculating the cost. Between displays, Sebastian perches briefly on a nearby twig and preens his gorget, those throat feathers that flash purple in the sunlight. The iridescence isn't from pigment, but from microscopic air bubbles in the feather structure that refract light. You know this because you spent a whole morning investigating your own throat feathers, wondering why they only shimmer at certain angles. The physics of beauty, it turns out, is just as complex as the physics of flight. The social pressure intensifies as both males pause their displays, clearly waiting for some sign of preference from you. This is the hummingbird equivalent of that awkward moment when 2 people ask you to dance at the same time. Except instead of hurting someone's feelings on a dance floor, you're managing the emotional states of creatures who can zip away at 30 miles per hour if rejected. You make an executive decision. With a quick chirp that roughly translates to, "Lovely displays, gentlemen, but I have flowers to visit." You zoom off toward the untapped salvia patch behind the shed. Let them think you're playing hard to get. The truth is, you're just hungry, and social interaction, no matter how biologically necessary, doesn't fill your crop with the precious nectar you need to survive another day. The late afternoon sun slants through the canopy at that particular angle that reminds you of unfinished business. Specifically, the half-constructed nest wedged in the fork of the oak tree that you've been meaning to work on for the past 3 days. As you drain the last drops from a particularly generous honeysuckle bloom, the guilt settles in your crop alongside the nectar, equally heavy but far less nourishing. You fly over to inspect your architectural work in progress, and the sight makes your already rapid heartbeat accelerate with anxiety. It's barely a quarter done. Just a sad little platform of plant down and spider silk that looks more like a cotton ball that got caught in the tree than the marvel of engineering it's supposed to become. A finished hummingbird nest should be about the size of a walnut shell, perfectly camouflaged with lichen and held together with spider silk for stretch and durability. Yours currently looks like someone sneezed while holding craft supplies. The comparison to human home improvement projects isn't lost on you. At least when humans procrastinate on finishing their deck or bathroom renovation, they don't have to worry about laying eggs in an incomplete structure. Your biological clock doesn't care that you need 2,000 flowers worth of energy just to maintain basic bodily functions. It wants a nest, and it wants it soon. You dart over to the corner where the spiders have been busy, those 8-legged construction supply stores that unwittingly provide the binding material for your home. Spider silk is nature's wonder material, 5 times stronger than steel by weight, and flexible enough to expand as baby hummingbirds grow. You begin the delicate work of stealing silk without becoming entangled yourself, a task that requires the precision of a jewel thief and the speed of, well, a hummingbird. As you work, carefully wrapping the silk around the base structure, you can't help but think about those human home improvement shows where everything comes together in 30 minutes. They don't show the part where the builder has to stop every 12 minutes to consume their body weight in sugar water or risk passing out. They also have power tools. You have a beak the width of a toothpick and feet so tiny they can barely grip a branch, let alone hold building materials in place. The multitasking required makes your brain buzz almost as fast as your wings. Collect spider silk, weave it into the structure, stop to feed, check for predators, back to building, another feeding break, defend territory from Gerald, who's apparently expanded his empire to include your nesting tree, more building, more feeding. It's like trying to build IKEA furniture while running a marathon and defending your home from burglars. Female hummingbirds do all the nest building, a fact that sometimes makes you want to stage a tiny feminist revolution. The males get to spend their energy on fancy dive displays and territorial disputes while you're over here trying to create a structure that needs to be strong enough to hold eggs the size of navy beans, but flexible enough to stretch as the babies grow. The engineering requirements alone would challenge a team of architects, and you're working solo with a brain the size of a grain of rice. You've collected some promising cattail fluff for lining, but now you face the classic hummingbird dilemma. Carry the materials back to the nest or stop at the coral bells for a quick refuel. The fluff is ultra-light but still creates drag, reducing your flight efficiency by an estimated 15%. That means burning more calories to cover the same distance. But if you stop to feed first, the wind might blow away your carefully gathered materials. The decision paralysis is real. You hover in place, burning precious energy on indecision which just makes the situation worse. This must be what humans feel like in the cereal aisle, except their choices don't involve immediate metabolic consequences. You opt for a compromise, zipping to the nearest fuchsia for a 3-second power drink before racing back to secure your building materials. Back at the nest site, you begin the meticulous work of weaving the cattail fluff into the spider silk framework. Each piece must be individually placed and secured, a process that would test the patience of a Buddhist monk. Your tongue, that same appendage that licks nectar at 13 times per second, now serves as a precision placement tool, tucking each fiber exactly where it needs to go. The neighbor's cat appears below, looking up with that casual interest that makes every small bird's life unnecessarily stressful. Great! As if you didn't have enough to worry about, now you need to factor in predator surveillance while doing construction work. It's like trying to renovate your kitchen while someone randomly points a loaded cannon at your house. You've heard that some hummingbird species decorate their nests with lichen to provide camouflage, basically creating the avian equivalent of a green roof. The idea appeals to you, but when? When are you supposed to source and apply decorative lichen when you can barely manage basic structural integrity while maintaining your feeding schedule? This must be how humans feel about those Pinterest projects that look so simple until you're elbow deep in hot glue and regret. The sun continues its relentless march toward the horizon, and your nest remains stubbornly unfinished. At this rate, it'll take another week to complete, assuming you can find enough spider silk and don't pass out from exhaustion first. You add inadequate home builder to your growing list of personal failures, right between inefficient territory defender and socially awkward mate evaluator. Tomorrow you promise yourself. Tomorrow you'll wake up extra early and dedicate real time to nest construction. Except you know that tomorrow you'll wake up with the same metabolic demands, the same 1,000 flowers to visit, the same territorial battles to fight. The nest will wait, growing more urgent, but no more achievable, a walnut-sized monument to the impossibility of work-life balance when your work is staying alive. The light has taken on that amber quality that signals the approaching end of another day, and you find yourself perched on your favorite observation twig, the one that gives you a clear view of both the feeder and the bee balm patch. Your crop is comfortably full for the moment, but your mind is doing that thing again, the thing where it starts tallying up the day's consumption like some sort of anxious accountant. Let's see. You started before dawn at the feeder, approximately 2 grams of sugar water. Then the salvias, maybe half a gram of nectar across 15 blooms. The trumpet vine yielded another gram. The fuchsias contributed 1.5 grams, and you honestly lost count at the coral bells because Gerald started his nonsense again. All told, you've consumed roughly 6 grams of liquid today, twice your body weight. The numbers stare back at you like an accusation. Is this normal? The question haunts you as you watch a house finch leisurely cracking seeds at the platform feeder. That bird probably ate a reasonable breakfast, had a sensible lunch, and will enjoy a modest dinner before roosting for the night. You've been mainlining sugar water like some kind of tiny, feathered hype beast who discovered an unlimited supply of energy drinks. The comparison to human diet culture isn't lost on you. They have apps to track calories, step counters to monitor activity, and entire industries built around the concept of mindful eating. Meanwhile, you're over here forced into the opposite of mindfulness, frantically consuming without pause because stopping means plummeting. Both literally and metabolically. A ruby-throated colleague zips past, heading for the petunias, and you catch yourself performing a quick visual assessment. Does she look properly nourished? Is her gorget brilliant enough? Are her wing beats strong and steady? This constant evaluation of other hummingbirds' metabolic success has become second nature, but you recognize it as the same toxic comparison culture that makes humans miserable about their bodies. The truth is, hummingbirds must consume between half to twice their body weight in nectar daily, plus protein from small insects and spiders. This isn't gluttony or lack of self-control. It's biology. Your metabolic rate is so high that you literally cannot store enough energy to last more than a few hours. You're not binge eating, you're surviving. But knowing the science doesn't quiet the voice that whispers you should somehow need less. You spot a gnat hovering near the lantana and snap it up with practiced precision. Protein, essential amino acids, the building blocks your body needs for those flight muscles that make up 30% of your body weight. But even this necessary addition to your diet comes with mental calculations. How many gnats equal one flower visit in terms of energy expenditure? Is hunting insects worth the caloric cost? The feeder beckons again, that reliable source of concentrated sweetness that part of you has come to view with suspicion. 20% sugar solution, perfectly calibrated for hummingbird needs, but somehow it feels like cheating. Real flowers make you work for your nectar, probing and licking and maneuvering. The feeder just sits there, offering easy calories like some sort of fast food drive-through for birds. You've noticed the humans sometimes forget to clean the feeder for a few days, and the sugar water starts to ferment. Last week, you watched Harold, that usually dignified, broad-billed fellow, get absolutely loaded on fermented feeder juice and spend 10 minutes trying to hover upside down. The second-hand embarrassment was intense, but it also made you wonder about your own relationship with sugar. Are you an addict, or just a creature perfectly evolved for a high-octane lifestyle? The mental math continues relentlessly. Each flower species offers different nectar concentrations. Salvias averaged 22% sugar, while those showy hibiscus blooms barely hit 15%. You've become a walking database of nutritional information, the hummingbird equivalent of someone who memorizes the calorie count of every menu item at their favorite restaurant. Sometimes you envy the vultures. Those guys can go days between meals, circling lazily on thermals while waiting for something unfortunate to become available. Sure, their diet is somewhat macabre, but at least they don't have to eat every 10 minutes or risk entering metabolic crisis. They probably don't lie awake at night calculating their daily carrion intake either. A butterfly lands gracefully on a zinnia, proboscis unfurling with zen-like calm. Butterflies can actually taste with their feet, determining if a flower is worth their time before committing to feeding. You have to dive in, tongue first, and hope for the best, burning calories on flowers that might be already depleted. It's like grocery shopping while blindfolded and on a timer. The setting sun paints the garden in shades of coral and gold, and you realize you need to visit at least 40 more flowers before entering Torpor tonight. The pressure builds in your chest, or maybe that's just your heart, maintaining its 1,000+ beats per minute. It's hard to distinguish between emotional stress and the physical demands of being a hummingbird sometimes. You think about those human fitness influencers again, the ones who post about intuitive eating and honoring your hunger. What would intuitive eating even look like for a hummingbird? Your intuition screams, eat constantly or die, which doesn't exactly align with the mindful moderation they're promoting. You're pretty sure no wellness coach would approve of your twice body weight daily consumption, even if it is mostly sugar water and bug protein. The truth settles over you like the approaching dusk. You don't have an eating disorder. You have a hummingbird metabolism, which might actually be worse. At least eating disorders can be treated. Your relationship with food is hardwired into every cell, every feather, every frantically beating chamber of your inexhaustible heart. You'll wake up tomorrow with the same desperate hunger, the same mathematical relationship between consumption and survival. The sky has shifted to that particular shade of purple that signals the approaching metabolic cliff, and you feel your body beginning its involuntary preparation for the nightly shutdown. Torpor. Even the word sounds ominous, like something a Victorian doctor would diagnose before prescribing bed rest and laudanum. But for you, it's not an illness or a choice. It's the only way to make it through the night without starving to death in your sleep. You've secured a decent perch in the dense part of the holly bush, one that offers reasonable protection from wind and predators while still allowing for a quick morning escape. The location selection process took 20 minutes and burned approximately 0.7 calories you couldn't really spare. But sleeping in the wrong spot could mean becoming an owl's midnight snack. So here you are, overthinking real estate decisions like a tiny feathered house hunter. The familiar pre-torpor anxiety begins its nightly spiral. Your body temperature, normally a toasty 105 degrees Fahrenheit, will soon plummet to as low as 50 degrees. Your heart rate will drop from its current 1,000 beats per minute to fewer than 50. Essentially, you're about to become a zombie hummingbird for the next 8 hours, and that transformation never gets less weird. Scientists call it controlled hypothermia, a state where hummingbirds can reduce their metabolic rate by up to 95%. It sounds impressive when you phrase it like that, all scientific and purposeful. But the reality is you're about to slip into a state so deep that you won't be able to respond to threats, opportunities, or really anything short of someone physically shaking your branch. The FOMO hits hard as you watch the last of the day shift creatures settling down. What if something amazing happens tonight? What if a new night-blooming Sirius opens and you miss those precious early nectar reserves? What if a rare moth shows up and you're too comatose to catch it? You'll wake up tomorrow to Gerald bragging about all the exciting nocturnal events you missed while you were busy impersonating a feathered ice cube. Your crop performs one last gurgle, processing the final drops of nectar from your evening binge. You manage to pack away an extra gram in the last hour, a metabolic savings account that should see you through until dawn. Should. The uncertainty gnaws at you like hunger itself. What if you miscalculated? What if tonight runs colder than expected and you burn through your reserves faster? What if you enter torpor too early and wake up before dawn with nothing left in the tank? The entering process has already begun, whether you're ready or not. Your extremities start feeling sluggish, like when humans describe their limbs falling asleep. Except your entire body is about to take that plunge. Your wings, usually ready to burst into 75 beats per second at a moment's notice, begin to feel heavy and unresponsive. This is the vulnerable window, the 15 to 20 minutes where you're neither fully awake nor safely torpid. You think about those meditation apps humans use, the ones with soothing voices telling them to let go and surrender to rest. They have no idea what letting go really means. Try surrendering so completely that your body temperature drops by 50 degrees and your heart nearly stops. Try achieving a state of relaxation so profound that a curious cat could bat you off your perch and you wouldn't wake up until you hit the ground. The first wave of torpor rolls through you like cold honey, thick and inevitable. Your thoughts begin to slow, though annoyingly, they don't stop. This is the worst part, the mental awareness of physical shutdown. You can feel your heart rate declining, each beat coming later than the last, like a drummer gradually losing the tempo. Your scientific mind knows this is normal, necessary even, but your anxious mind screams that something is going wrong. What if you picked the wrong night to enter deep torpor? Some nights, you only let yourself slip into light torpor, maintaining enough metabolic function to respond to threats. But that burns more calories, leaving you depleted come morning. It's like choosing between a good night's sleep and home security, except the stakes are life and death rather than stolen Amazon packages. Your field of vision begins to narrow as your body redirects every possible resource toward basic survival. The garden that was so vibrant moments ago fades to indistinct shadows. You're aware of Margaret settling into her own torpor spot across the garden, and there's odd comfort in knowing you're not alone in this nightly metabolic gamble. Even Gerald, for all his daytime bravado, is probably entering his own state of suspended animation somewhere nearby. The temperature drop accelerates now, and you can actually feel your metabolism downshifting like a car engine cutting from sixth gear to first. Your last coherent thought before the deep torpor takes hold is a mixture of tomorrow's feeding, route planning, and existential dread about spending a third of your life in this death-adjacent state. What kind of existence requires you to nearly die every night just to survive until morning? But even as consciousness fades, some tiny part of your hummingbird brain maintains its vigil, counting the slow heartbeats, monitoring the energy reserves, ready to sound the alarm if things go too far south. You're a biological marvel, a creature that cheats death nightly through the simple expedient of mostly dying on purpose. The thought should be comforting, probably. The final descent into torpor feels like sinking into dark water, if water were made of molasses and thyme. Your last sensation is the gentle grip of your feet on the branch, those tiny toes locked in position by specialized tendons that work even when you don't. Tomorrow you'll wake with the dawn, heart racing back to life, metabolism roaring like a restarted engine. But for now, you're just a small, cold shadow in the holly bush, dreaming whatever dreams come to hummingbirds who've learned to embrace their own nightly extinction. Deep in the grip of torpor, your mind does that peculiar thing where consciousness floats somewhere between dream and thought, like nectar suspended in water. Even with your body temperature hovering at 52 degrees and your heart barely thumping along, the existential questions refuse to rest. What exactly are you doing with your life? The question echoes in the strange, slow-motion chamber of your torpid mind. You've been told, in the way that evolution tells all creatures through instinct and behavior, that your purpose is pollination. You're a flying fertilization service, a critical link in the reproductive cycle of flowering plants. Your entire body, from your specialized tongue to your precise hovering ability, has been designed for this one job. But lying here in your nightly near-death state, you can't help but wonder if that's really all there is. The statistics float through your sluggish consciousness like lazy bubbles. A single hummingbird can visit between 1,000 and 2,000 flowers per day, transferring pollen with each visit. You're personally responsible for the genetic mixing of countless plants, ensuring biodiversity and the continuation of floral species. It sounds important when you frame it that way. So why does it feel so empty? Maybe it's because you never get to see the results. You visit a cardinal flower, get pollen on your forehead, transfer it to another cardinal flower, and then what? You don't stick around to watch the seeds develop or see new plants sprouting. You're like a matchmaker who never gets invited to the wedding, forever facilitating connections you'll never witness coming to fruition. In your torpor dreams, you imagine an alternate reality where hummingbirds get performance reviews. Subject successfully pollinated 847 flowers this quarter, showing a 12% increase over the last period. However, territorial disputes with Gerald resulted in decreased efficiency in the southern garden quadrant. recommend additional training in conflict resolution. The thought of your life reduced to metrics makes your slowly beating heart feel even heavier. Flowers visited per hour, successful pollination rate, territory defended versus territory lost, nectar consumption optimization. Is this really what 400 million years of evolution has led to? A tiny bird, anxiety-driven productivity machine? You think about the humans who watch you through their windows, smiling and pointing when you appear at their feeders. To them, you're a source of joy, a flash of iridescent beauty in their everyday lives. They probably don't think about your pollination statistics or your metabolic efficiency. They just see a tiny bird that can fly backwards and think, how delightful. Maybe there's something to that perspective. But then again, humans romanticize everything. They probably think dolphins are always happy too, not realizing those permanent smiles are just facial structure. They watch nature documentaries and assign human emotions to every creature, creating narratives where none exist. Are you really bringing joy, or are you just another productivity unit in the grand ecosystem machine, dressed up in pretty feathers? Your torpid brain struggles with the question of legacy. Humans build monuments, write books, leave their mark on the world in tangible ways. What do you leave behind? A slightly higher fruit yield on the plants you service? A few successful offspring who'll face the same relentless cycle of feed, fight, pollinate, repeat? Even your nest, that architectural marvel you stress so much about building, will weather away within a season. The Buddhist concept of impermanence drifts through your consciousness, probably overheard from the meditation podcast the garden's owner plays while watering plants. Everything is temporary. Nothing lasts. Existence is flux. It sounds very zen until you realize it means your entire frantic existence amounts to a brief flicker in the cosmic timeline. You're not even a candle in the wind. You're more like a spark from a birthday sparkler, bright and gone. But wait, your sluggish mind catches on something. Those meditation teachers also talk about the interconnectedness of all things, how every action ripples outward in ways we can't imagine. That flower you pollinated last week might produce seeds that feed a finch that survives winter to sing songs that inspire a human to protect a garden where future generations of hummingbirds will thrive. The web of connection spreads beyond your ability to trace it. Still, the doubt persists. Are you actually essential or just one of many redundant systems? If you weren't here, wouldn't the bees handle the pollination? Wouldn't the flowers find another way? Evolution tends toward redundancy, multiple solutions to the same problem. You're not the only pollinator in town, just the one with the highest metabolism and the most anxiety about it. Your torpor-slowed thoughts turn to the question of consciousness itself. Do other hummingbirds contemplate their purpose, or is this existential crisis uniquely yours? Maybe Gerald spends his torpor time in blissful unconsciousness while you lie here having a philosophical crisis at 50 beats per minute. Maybe the real evolutionary disadvantage isn't your metabolic rate, but your tendency to overthink everything. The garden exists in that perfect stillness that comes in the deep of night, and you exist in that perfect stillness that comes with torpor, and somehow in this intersection of quietudes, a thought crystallizes. Maybe purpose isn't about grand gestures or measurable impacts. Maybe it's about showing up every day, visiting your flowers, defending your territory, building your nest, entering your torpor, and trusting that it all adds up to something meaningful, even if you never get to see the sum. You think about tomorrow, assuming you wake up from this metabolic gamble. You'll visit many of the same flowers, chase Gerald away from the same feeders, stress about the same unfinished nest. But you'll also be part of something larger, a dance between bird and bloom that's been going on for millions of years. You're not just a pollination service provider. You're a participant in one of evolution's most beautiful partnerships. The thought doesn't entirely quiet your existential anxiety, but it does make the torpor feel less like death and more like rest. Tomorrow you'll wake up and resume your role in the great garden orchestra, playing your part at 1200 beats per minute. Whether that adds up to meaning or just motion, well, maybe that's a question for philosophers with slower metabolisms and more time to think. The darkness of deep torpor finally claims your consciousness completely, drawing you down into that space where even anxiety cannot follow. Your body settles into its nightly near death, each heartbeat spacing itself further and further apart until time itself seems to pause between them. In this profound stillness, something shifts. The frantic, calculating voice that narrates your days grows quiet, replaced by the ancient wisdom of a body that knows how to survive. Your cells continue their slow work of conservation, each one a tiny miracle of efficiency that humans with all their technology still can't replicate. You're not failing at life. You're succeeding at one of nature's most demanding existence patterns. The garden breathes around you in its own nighttime rhythm. Flowers close their petals, conserving their nectar for tomorrow's visits. Night-blooming Sirius unfurls in secret splendor, waiting for sphinx moths instead of hummingbirds. The world continues its dance of give and take, predator and prey, bloom and fade, and you're part of it all, even in this state of suspended animation. Perhaps this is the real lesson of torpor. Sometimes survival means letting go completely. Not the gentle releasing that meditation teachers advocate, but the profound surrender of biological necessity. You cannot control everything. You cannot optimize every moment. Sometimes you must simply trust your body's ancient wisdom and fall into the darkness, believing that dawn will wake you once again. Your feet grip the branch with that automatic certainty that outlasts consciousness. Your feathers settle into their most heat-conserving arrangement without any conscious direction. Even now, barely alive by any reasonable measure, you're perfectly adapted to your existence. The anxiety about work-life balance seems suddenly absurd when you realize you've evolved the ultimate work-life integration, where even your rest serves your survival. Tomorrow, the sun will warm your small body back to life. Your heart will quicken from 50 beats to 500 to 1,000. The hunger will return like a tidal wave, sending you into the garden for another day of perpetual motion. But for now, in this space between heartbeats, you're exactly where you need to be. A small miracle of metabolism, resting in the darkness, dreaming whatever dreams come to creatures who live at the very edge of what's possible. That's all for today. Sweet dreams.
Sleep, sweet, drift away. Tomorrow brings a brand new day. Dream, dream, to sail so far. You're my precious little star. Shh.